Commander Zara Thelvos pressed her hand against the cold metal wall of her ship's bridge. Through the large window, she could see the burning remains of what used to be a beautiful world. Kepler 442b had been home to 50 million people just 3 days ago. Now it was nothing but fire and smoke. "Commander, the last transport ship is almost full," her second officer reported. His voice shook as he spoke. Like everyone else on the bridge, he had watched too many worlds die in the past month. Zara nodded but did not take her eyes off the dying planet below. The Vorthix swarm had come without warning, as they always did. First, the bioships appeared at the edge of the system like a dark cloud. Then they spread across space, growing larger and hungrier with each world they consumed. The swarm did not just destroy planets, it ate them, turning everything into more ships, more weapons, more death. "How many survivors did we get?" Zara asked. "About 2 million from this system," the officer replied. "We saved who we could, but ... He did not need to finish. They both knew the math. 50 million people had lived on Kepler 442b. 2 million survivors meant 48 million dead. It was the same story on every world the swarm had touched. Zara turned away from the window and looked at the star chart displayed in the center of the bridge. Red dots marked the systems that had fallen to the Vorthek. The red was spreading like a disease across the galaxy. Green dots showed the remaining coalition worlds, but there were fewer every day. "Set course for Centaurus Prime," she ordered. "Maximum speed." The ship shuddered as its engines came to life. Around them, the rest of the evacuation fleet did the same. 47 ships carried the last survivors of the Kepler sector. It was not enough. It was never enough. As they jumped to faster-than-light travel, Zara thought about the first time she had heard about the Vorthix swarm. It was 8 months ago, when reports came in from the Outer Rim territories. Strange. Ships that looked like they were grown instead of built. Weapons that turned living creatures into twisted machines. An enemy that never spoke, never negotiated, never stopped. The Coalition had sent their best fleets to stop the swarm, the proud Alterian Navy with ships that could crack planets in half. The clever Zephyrian Defense Force, masters of space tactics and strategy. The mighty Corvin Armada, whose warriors had never known defeat. They were all gone now. Every fleet, every admiral, every soldier who had faced the swarm had been destroyed. Or worse, turned into part of the enemy. The Vorthek did not just kill their victims. They changed them, made them into new weapons to use against their former friends. Zara had been lucky to escape the Battle of Rigel Prime. She watched from her damaged ship as the swarm overwhelmed Admiral Korthek's entire fleet in less than 6 hours. The bioships moved like living things, flowing around the Coalition's formations like water around rocks. When they attached to Coalition vessels, the ships screamed. Actual screams came through the communication systems as the crews were turned into something else. The flight to Centaurus Prime took 4 hours. When they arrived, Zara saw that the situation was even worse than she had feared. The planet's orbital defense platforms were already under attack. Massive bioships, each one the size of a small moon, pressed against the energy shields that protected the last Coalition stronghold. "This is Admiral Venturok," came a voice over the communication system. "All evacuation ships, dock at stations 7 through 12. Civilian ships, prepare for immediate departure to the inner systems." Zara knew Admiral Venturok well. He was a good officer and a better person. He was also one of the last high-ranking Coalition commanders still alive. The weight of the entire galaxy's survival rested on his shoulders, and everyone could hear the strain in his voice. After docking, Zara made her way to the command center deep inside Centaurus Prime's main station. The massive room buzzed with activity as officers from dozens of different species worked desperately to coordinate the defense. The air smelled of fear and exhaustion. Admiral Venturok stood in the center of it all, his tall blue form hunched over a tactical display. His species, the Zelani, were known for their calm minds and careful planning. But even he looked defeated as he watched the red dots on his screen grow closer to the planet. "Zara," he said when he saw her, "I'm glad you made it." How many did you save? 2 million from Kepler sector, she replied. But Admiral, the swarm is right behind us. Maybe 6 hours at most. Venturok closed his eyes for a moment. Then we're out of time. The Council is meeting in 1 hour to discuss our final options. The Coalition Council chamber had once been a symbol of unity and hope. Representatives from 100 worlds would gather here to discuss trade agreements, cultural exchanges, and scientific discoveries. Now, only 23 species remained, and their representatives looked like refugees rather than diplomats. Zara took her seat as the emergency session began. The chamber felt too large, too empty. She remembered when every seat was filled with beings who believed the galaxy could be a place of peace and cooperation. The situation is clear, Admiral Venturok announced to the assembly. Our forces have been reduced to less than 2% of their original strength. The Vorthic swarm will reach this system within hours. We have perhaps 1,000 ships left to defend against an enemy force that numbers in the millions. A Kovan representative, his reptilian face scarred from recent battles, spoke up. What about the deep system fortresses? Can we fall back there? The fortresses were designed to stop conventional fleets, the Admiral replied. Against the swarm, they will buy us days at most, not the months we need to rebuild. An old Zephyrian female raised her hand. Have we heard anything from the hegemony? Or the Free Traders Union? The hegemony fell 3 weeks ago, Venturok sighed quietly. As for the Free Traders, they've taken their ships and fled to the unknown regions. We are alone. The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. The coalition was the last organized government in the galaxy. When it fell, there would be nothing left to stop the swarm from consuming every living world. There is one option. We have not discussed, said a small voice from the back of the chamber. Everyone turned to look at Counselor Ythmarin, a tiny insectoid being whose species were known for their perfect memory and vast knowledge of galactic history. What option? The Admiral asked. Wide-eyed Marin's compound eyes glittered as she spoke. The quarantine zone. Sol 3. The humans. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Several representatives began speaking at once, their words mixing into a chaos of fear and disbelief. Absolutely not, declared the Corvan representative. The quarantine exists for good reason. Humans are too dangerous, too unpredictable. They've been isolated for 300 years, added another voice. They probably destroyed themselves by now. But Admiral Venturok held up his hand for silence. Continue, Counselor. Ythmarin stood on her hind legs to address the assembly. The original quarantine report stated that humans possessed highly advanced military technology and an unusually aggressive nature. Perhaps those very qualities that made them too dangerous for galactic society are exactly what we need now. Even if they're still alive, why would they help us? Asked the Zephyrian representative. We've kept them isolated for centuries. They have no reason to trust us or fight for us. Because, Ythmarin replied, according to all our studies of human behavior, they have one trait that overrides all others. They cannot stand to see innocent people suffer, even their enemies. The debate continued for another hour, but Zara could see that the council was slowly accepting the inevitable. They were desperate, and desperate people considered options they would never think about in normal times. Finally, Admiral Venturok called for a vote. All in favor of sending a distress signal to the Sol system? One by one, hands and claws, and tentacles rose into the air. When the count was finished, the vote was unanimous. As the council session ended and representatives hurried away to prepare for what might be their final battle, Zara remained in her seat. She thought about the stories she had heard about humans, violent, chaotic beings who fought wars with nuclear weapons and turned their own planet into a battlefield. But she also remembered the old saying that her grandmother had taught her. When you are drowning, you do not ask if the rope is clean. The galaxy was drowning now. Maybe it was time to reach for that rope, no matter how dangerous it might be. Admiral Sarah Chun was drinking her morning coffee when the impossible happened. The communication array at Luna Base picked up a signal from deep space, and it was not from any human ship or station. "Admiral, you need to see this immediately," came the urgent voice of Lieutenant Rodriguez over her personal communicator. Sarah set down her coffee and made her way to the command center of Earth's primary military headquarters. The underground facility had been built during the Third World War, expanded during the colonial wars, and upgraded countless times as humanity spread across their solar system. But it had never received an alien transmission before. "What do we have?" Sarah asked as she entered the main communication room. "It's definitely not human technology," Lieutenant Rodriguez explained, his face pale with excitement and fear. "The signal is using mathematical concepts we understand, but the technology behind it is unlike anything we've ever seen." Sarah looked at the data scrolling across the main screen. The transmission had taken weeks to reach Earth from somewhere beyond the outer planets. It was clearly artificial, clearly intelligent, and clearly not made by human hands. "Have you decoded the message?" she asked. "We're working on it, but Admiral ... there's something else. The signal is coming from the direction of Centaurus. And it's not the only one. We've detected similar transmissions from at least 12 other star systems in the past hour." Sarah felt her heart rate increase. For 3 centuries, humans had wondered if they were alone in the universe. They had built radio telescopes, sent probes to nearby stars, and searched for any sign of alien life. They had found nothing. Now, it seemed the aliens had found them. "Get me the Secretary General." "Immediately," Sarah ordered. "And contact all department heads. We need an emergency meeting within the hour." As the lieutenant hurried to make the calls, Sarah stared at the alien transmission data. Humanity had always prepared for this moment, but they had expected to be the ones making first contact. They had imagined themselves as explorers reaching out to primitive civilizations, not as the recipients of desperate messages from an advanced galactic community. 2 hours later, Sarah sat in a secure meeting room beneath the United Nations building in New Geneva. Around the table were the most powerful people on Earth: Secretary General Chun Wei, Director of Colonial Affairs Maria Santos, Intelligence Chief David Park, and the heads of the 3 major military branches. "The translation is complete," announced Dr. Elizabeth Nakamura, Earth's leading expert in xenolinguistics. She had spent her entire career studying the possibility of alien communication, never believing she would actually get the chance to use her skills. "The message is a formal distress call from something called the Galactic Coalition," Dr. Nakamura continued. "They claim to represent over 100 intelligent species across thousands of star systems. They are under attack by an enemy they call the Vortex Swarm, and they are requesting immediate military assistance." The room fell silent. Secretary General Chun Wei was the first to speak. "Are you saying that not only are we not alone in the universe, but there's an entire galactic civilization out there that we've never heard of?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," Dr. Nakamura replied. "But there's more. According to this message, they know about us. They've known about us for centuries. They deliberately kept us isolated because they considered us too dangerous to join their galactic community." The silence that followed was broken by a string of curses from General Marcus Thompson, head of the Space Force. "They quarantined us like we were some kind of disease?" Dr. Nakamura nodded grimly. "The message includes what they call historical context. Apparently, 300 years ago they observed human conflicts and decided that our species was too violent and unpredictable to be trusted with advanced technology or knowledge of galactic civilization." Sarah felt anger building in her chest. Humanity had spent centuries reaching for the stars, wondering if they were alone, dreaming of meeting other intelligent life. All that time, dozens of alien civilizations had been watching them, judging them, and deliberately keeping them in the dark. "So why are they contacting us now?" asked Director Santos. "Because they're losing," Dr. Nakamura said simply. "According to the message, this Vortex Swarm has destroyed most of their military forces. They've tried everything they know how to do, and it hasn't worked. Now they're desperate enough to ask for help from the species they considered too dangerous to trust. Intelligence Chief Park leaned forward. What do we know about this enemy they're fighting? Dr. Nakamura pulled up another screen of data. The swarm appears to be a collection of biomechanical ships that consume entire planets and turn the material into more weapons. They don't communicate, they don't negotiate, and they don't stop. The Coalition describes them as an extinction-level threat to all organic life in the galaxy. General Thompson looked around the table. What kind of military assistance are they requesting? Everything, Dr. Nakamura replied. Ships, weapons, soldiers, tactical support. They're not asking for a small favor. They want us to join their war effort and help them fight for the survival of galactic civilization. The debate that followed lasted for 6 hours. Some argued that humanity should ignore the message entirely. After all, these aliens had kept Earth isolated for centuries. Why should humans risk their lives to save people who had never trusted them? Others pointed out that if the swarm was truly an extinction threat, it would eventually reach Earth anyway. Better to fight them alongside allies than to face them alone, but it was Secretary General Chun Wei who made the argument that ultimately convinced the room. For 300 years, these aliens have judged us as too violent, too dangerous, too unpredictable. Maybe they were right. Maybe we are more violent than they are. Maybe we are more dangerous. But if their peaceful, cooperative, advanced civilization can't stop this threat, then maybe what they need is something violent and dangerous and unpredictable. The final vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. Earth would respond to the Coalition's distress call. Admiral Sarah Chun was given command of humanity's first interstellar military operation. She had 6 days to prepare before the first wave of ships would depart for Centaurus Prime. Those 6 days were unlike anything in human history. Across Earth's colonies, factories worked around the clock to build new weapons and ammunition. The orbital shipyards at Mars pushed their construction schedules to impossible limits. Volunteers lined up at recruitment centers faster than the military could process them, but the most important work was happening in the research laboratories. Human scientists studied every piece of information the Coalition had sent about the Vorthok swarm. They analyzed the enemy's tactics, their technology, their weaknesses. What they found was both encouraging and terrifying. The swarm was incredibly advanced with biological technology that could adapt and evolve in real time. But they seemed to rely entirely on biological systems. They had never faced an enemy that used purely mechanical technology like humans did. Their weapons are designed to turn living creatures into part of their collective, explained Dr. James Morrison, Earth's leading expert in biological warfare. But our soldiers aren't enhanced with biological implants like Coalition forces, apparently. Our weapons don't rely on biological components. We might be naturally immune to their primary method of conversion. Sarah nodded as she reviewed the tactical analysis. Humanity had developed their military technology in isolation, following a completely different path from the rest of the galaxy. Where aliens had enhanced their bodies with biological improvements, humans had built mechanical tools. Where aliens had created living weapons that could grow and adapt, humans had built machines that could be mass-produced and replaced. The differences went deeper than just technology. Human military doctrine was based on centuries of fighting. Other humans, an enemy that was clever, adaptable, and just as intelligent as they were. Coalition forces, according to their own reports, had spent most of their history fighting primitive species or wild animals. They had never faced an enemy like the swarm, but humans had always fought enemies exactly like themselves. On the final day before departure, Sarah stood on the observation deck of the UES Indomitable, humanity's newest and most powerful warship. Around her, the combined fleet of Earth's military forces prepared for their journey to the stars. 200 ships, carrying 50,000 soldiers and enough weapons to level a continent. It was not the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. During the colonial wars, they had sent bigger forces to fight each other over mining rights and territory disputes. But it was the first human fleet to leave the solar system with the intention of fighting aliens. Sarah thought about the message they had sent back to the coalition. It was simple and direct, written in the same mathematical language the aliens had used. We received your distress call. Help is coming. Prepare for immediate military support upon our arrival. Do not mistake our assistance for forgiveness. We will discuss your quarantine of our species after the current crisis is resolved. As the fleet prepared to jump to faster-than-light travel, Sarah wondered what they would find when they reached Centaurus Prime. Would the human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Centaurus system and immediately saw the nightmare that waited for them. Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable and watched the main screen display. A battle that looked like the end of the world. Massive bioships, each one the size of a city, swarmed around Centaurus Prime like hungry insects around a dying animal. The planet's energy shields flickered and sparked as they absorbed blow after blow from weapons that seemed to be alive. "My God," whispered Captain Marcus Webb, Sarah's second in command. "How many of them are there?" "Computer analysis suggests approximately 8,000 enemy vessels," reported Lieutenant Commander Kim Park from the tactical station. "They range in size from frigate class to dreadnought class, but their design is unlike anything in our databases." Sarah studied the alien ships on her screen. They did not look built, they looked grown. Curved surfaces that pulsed with organic rhythm. Weapons that extended from the hulls like reaching tentacles. And worst of all, they moved with the coordination of a living creature, not like separate ships working together. "What about coalition forces?" Sarah asked. "We're detecting maybe 300 friendly vessels," Kim replied. "Most of them are badly damaged and falling back toward the planet." As if responding to her words, they watched one of the coalition ships explode in a burst of blue fire. The bioships around it immediately moved toward the wreckage, and Sarah saw mechanical tendrils reach out to grab pieces of the destroyed vessel. "They're salvaging the debris," Captain Webb observed. "No, wait, they're eating it." Sarah felt her stomach turn as she watched the Vorthok ships literally consume the remains of the coalition vessel. Within minutes, the destroyed ship had been completely absorbed, and the bioships that had fed on it seemed slightly larger than before. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the planet," announced Communications Officer Lisa Rodriguez. "Put it through." The main screen changed to show the face of Admiral Venturok, the Zalani commander who had sent the original distress call. He looked like he had not slept in days, and his blue skin was pale with exhaustion. "Human vessels, this is Admiral Venturok of the Coalition Defense Force. I cannot express how grateful we are that you responded to our call for help." Sarah activated her own transmitter. "This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Space Force. We're here to assist, but I need to know the tactical situation." "The situation is desperate," Venturok replied honestly. "The swarm arrived 6 hours ago with overwhelming force. Our planetary shields are failing, and we have perhaps 30 minutes before they collapse completely. Once that happens, the bioships will begin consuming the planet and everyone on it." Sarah looked at her tactical display. The human fleet had 200 ships against 8,000 Vorthok vessels. The odds were worse than 40 to 1. In any normal military engagement, retreat would be the only sane option, but Sarah had not come this far to retreat. "Admiral Venturok, we're going to need you to pull your remaining ships back behind our formation. My fleet is about to engage the enemy." There was a pause before the alien admiral responded. "Admiral Chun, I appreciate your courage, but you cannot possibly fight that many ships with only 200 vessels. You should evacuate as many civilians as possible and retreat while you still can." Sarah smiled grimly. "Admiral, you called us here because your peaceful, civilized methods weren't working. Now let us show you how humans solve problems." She turned to her communications officer. "Send a message to all ships. Attack formation Delta 7. Primary. Targets are the largest bioships. Rules of engagement are simple. If it's not human or broadcasting coalition identification, destroy it." "Admiral," Captain Webb said quietly, "are you sure about this?" We're outnumbered 40-1. Sarah looked at him steadily. Marcus, humans have been fighting impossible odds since we lived in caves. The only difference is that this time we're fighting for someone else instead of against each other. The human fleet moved into attack formation with a precision that surprised the watching coalition forces. Unlike the flowing, organic movements of the Vortex swarm, the human ships moved in rigid geometric patterns, each vessel knowing exactly where it needed to be and when. All ships, this is Admiral Chun, Sarah announced over the fleet communication system. Remember, these things have been designed to fight enemies like our new friends here. They've never fought enemies like us. Show them why the galaxy was afraid to invite us to their party. The first human weapons to fire were the long-range missile systems. Hundreds of nuclear-tipped projectiles streaked across space toward the largest Vortex bioships. The aliens tried to intercept them with defensive weapons, but the missiles used purely mechanical guidance systems that the bioships' organic sensors could not properly track. The explosions lit up space like new stars, where the coalition's energy weapons had barely scratched the bioships' living armor. Human nuclear weapons tore massive holes in their hulls. The damaged ships screamed, actual sound waves transmitted through space by some unknown biological process. "Target the wounded ships," Sarah ordered. "Hit them with everything we have before they can regenerate." The human fleet closed in and the real slaughter began. Kinetic weapons, simple metal projectiles fired at incredible speeds, punched through bioship armor like bullets through paper. Electromagnetic pulse bombs shut down entire sections of the swarm's organic nervous systems. Chemical weapons designed to fight human soldiers proved devastatingly effective against living alien technology, but the Vorthik were not helpless. As the human ships moved closer, the bioships began to adapt. Their weapons evolved in real time, growing new forms to counter human tactics. Acidic projectiles that could eat through human armor. Biological viruses designed to infect human computer systems. The USS Manchester was the first human ship to fall. A Vorthik weapon sprayed it with some kind of organic compound that began dissolving the hull. Captain Torres tried to evacuate her crew, but the bioships moved in to capture the escape pods. They did not get the chance. Captain Torres set off her ship's self-destruct system, taking herself, her crew, and 3 Vorthik vessels with her in a nuclear explosion that lit up the battlefield. "All ships, be advised," Sarah announced grimly. "Do not allow yourselves to be captured alive. These things turn prisoners into weapons." The battle raged for 2 hours. Human ships died in nuclear fire rather than surrender. Vorthek bioships fell to weapons they had never evolved to face, and slowly, impossibly, the tide began to turn. The moment that changed everything came when Captain Webb volunteered for a suicide mission. "Admiral, the largest bioship is coordinating the entire swarm," he reported. "If we can take it out, the rest might lose their coordination." Sarah looked at the massive vessel on her screen. It was the size of a small moon, protected by dozens of smaller bioships. Getting close enough to damage it would require flying through a storm of alien weapons. "What are you proposing, Marcus?" "Ramming speed," he said simply. "The Indomitable has the strongest armor and the most powerful engines. If I can get close enough, I can punch right through their command ship." Sarah felt her heart clench. Marcus. Webb had been her friend for 20 years. They had served together during the colonial wars, survived battles that should have killed them both. Now he was asking her permission to die. "You'll never make it through their defenses," she said. Marcus smiled. "Maybe not, but I'll get close enough to hurt them, and Admiral, once I'm inside that thing, I'm activating every nuclear weapon on this ship. Even if they turn me into one of them, I'm taking that monster with me." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, her voice was steady. "Permission granted, Captain. Give them hell." The Indomitable broke formation and accelerated toward the Vorthik command ship. Every weapon on the massive bio-vessel turned toward the approaching human ship. Energy beams and living projectiles hammered against the Indomitable's armor, tearing away chunks of metal and leaving glowing scars across the hull. but the ship kept coming. Marcus. Webb's voice came over the communication system one last time. All human vessels, this is Captain Webb. It has been an honor serving with you. Tell Earth that we did not go quietly. The Indomitable slammed into the Vorthek command ship at nearly the speed of light. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the largest nuclear explosion in human history lit up the center of the battle. When the light faded, the massive bioship was gone, and across the battlefield, the remaining Vorthak vessels suddenly moved differently, like puppets whose strings had been cut. Admiral Sarah Chun looked at her tactical display and realized something incredible. They were winning. All ships, press the attack, she ordered. Make Captain Webb's sacrifice count. The human fleet surged forward, and the Vorthak swarm, for the first time in its existence, began to retreat. 3 months after the Battle of Centaurus Prime, the war had changed completely. What started as humanity's desperate attempt to help the Coalition had become something much bigger. The humans were no longer just fighting to save alien civilizations. They were teaching the galaxy how to fight back. Admiral Sarah Chun stood in the command center of the newly constructed Firebase Alpha, humanity's first military base outside the Sol system. Around her, officers from a dozen different species worked alongside human personnel, all of them focused on the massive tactical display that showed the current state of the war. The display told a story that would have seemed impossible just months ago. Green dots showed systems that had been liberated from the Vorthak swarm. Yellow dots marked systems where fighting was still happening. Red dots were systems still under swarm control. And for the first time since the war began, there were more green dots than red ones. Admiral, the latest report from the Rigel sector, announced Commander Lisa Rodriguez, who had been promoted after her excellent work during the first battle. General Morrison's forces have successfully cleared all Vorthak ships from the system. The bioships tried to adapt to our tactics, but our new ammunition made their evolution useless. Sarah nodded with satisfaction. The new ammunition was one of humanity's most important contributions to the war effort. While the Coalition had relied on energy weapons that the Vorthak could eventually adapt to resist, humans had developed something much simpler and more effective. Bullets that changed their composition every few seconds. The idea had come from Dr. James Morrison, the same scientist who had first analyzed Vorthak biology. If the bioships could evolve to resist specific types of damage, then humans would use weapons that never stayed the same type for more than a few moments. Bullets that shifted between explosive, armor-piercing, incendiary, and chemical payloads in random patterns. The Vorthak biological systems could not adapt fast enough to keep up. What about the Zephyrian Defense Force? Sarah asked. How are they handling the new training protocols? Better than expected, replied Colonel David Park, who had been put in charge of training Coalition forces in human military tactics. The Zephyrians are natural strategic thinkers. They're adapting quickly to our combined arms approach. The Corvan warriors are having more trouble with the concept of tactical retreat, but they're learning. The training program had been Sarah's idea. Simply having human forces fight alongside Coalition troops was not enough. They needed to teach their allies how to think like humans, how to fight like humans, how to be unpredictable and adaptable in ways that the galaxy had never considered before. The first lesson had been the hardest for the aliens to accept, sometimes. The best way to win a battle was to lose it first. Human military doctrine was built around the idea of strategic retreat, regrouping and counterattack. Coalition forces, raised in a galaxy where superior technology and firepower usually decided conflicts quickly, had never learned how to fight a long, grinding war of attrition, but humans had been fighting each other for thousands of years. They knew how to take losses, fall back, learn from their mistakes, and come back stronger. Most importantly, they knew how to make their enemies think they were winning right up until the moment they lost everything. Admiral, called out Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka from the intelligence station, we're receiving an interesting report from the Vorthak front lines. Sarah walked over to the intelligence station, where Tanaka was displaying intercepted Vorthak communications. The bioships had never communicated before humans entered the war. Now, for the first time, they were sending signals to each other, signals that human computers could decode. "What are they saying?" Sarah asked. "They're confused," Tanaka replied with a slight smile. "Their messages keep referring to unpredictable, prey, and impossible adaptations. It seems like they're having trouble understanding human tactics." Sarah was not surprised. The Vorthak had evolved to fight enemies that followed logical, predictable patterns. They expected their opponents to use their best weapons first, to protect their most valuable ships, to retreat when facing overwhelming odds. Humans did none of those things. Human commanders would sacrifice their most powerful ships to protect smaller vessels if it served a strategic purpose. They would attack when outnumbered and retreat when they had the advantage, all as part of larger plans that the Vorthak could not predict. They would use weak weapons against strong targets and strong weapons against weak targets, depending on what would confuse the enemy most disturbing to the Vorthak. Humans would deliberately lose battles in order to win wars. "Admiral, incoming priority message from Earth," announced the communications officer. The main screen shifted to show Secretary General Chunwei, calling from his office in New Geneva. Behind him, Sarah could see the lights of Earth cities. Through the window, a reminder of the home they were all fighting to protect. "Admiral Chun, I have good news and concerning news," the Secretary General began. "The good news is that the United Nations has approved your request for additional forces. We're sending another 500 ships and 100,000 soldiers." Sarah felt relief wash over her. The war was going well, but it was far from over. Every additional ship and soldier brought them closer to final victory. "What's the concerning news?" she asked. "Our intelligence services have intercepted coalition communications," Chunwei continued. "It appears that some coalition leaders are becoming worried about human influence in galactic affairs. They're grateful for our help, but they're starting to ask questions about what happens after the war is over." Sarah was not surprised by this either. Fear was a natural response to seeing just how effective human military forces could be. The same qualities that made humans valuable allies also made them potentially dangerous enemies. "How worried should we be?" Sarah asked. "Not very for now," the Secretary General replied. "But Admiral, I want you to remember that we're not just fighting this war for the coalition. We're fighting it for humanity's place in the galaxy. Make sure that when this is over, no one will ever think about quarantining us again." After the transmission ended, Sarah returned to studying the tactical displays. The war was indeed going well, but she knew that the hardest battles were still ahead. The Vorthak had been driven back to their core territories, but that also meant they were now concentrated and desperate. "Admiral, we have a problem," called out Commander Rodriguez. "Long-range scouts are reporting massive Vorthak buildup in the Kepler Nebula. It looks like they're preparing for one final offensive." Sarah studied the new intelligence data. The Vorthak were gathering every remaining bioship in a single location, creating a force that might be larger than anything they had fielded before. It was a desperate move, but also a dangerous one. "How many ships are we looking at?" Sarah asked. "Conservative estimate?" 50,000 bioships, including some that are larger than anything we've seen before. The command center fell silent. Even with all their victories, the human coalition forces could field maybe 10,000 ships. For a major battle, 5-to-1 odds were better than the 40-to-1 they had faced at Centaurus Prime, but it would still be the biggest battle in galactic history. "Where do you think they're planning to attack?" Sarah asked. Commander Rodriguez highlighted a star system on the tactical display. "Based on their positioning and movement patterns, probably the Altair system. It's the Coalition's primary industrial center now that Earth has taken over most military production." Sarah studied the star chart for a long moment. Altair was indeed the logical target. If the Vorthak could destroy the Coalition's industrial capacity, they might be able to drag the war out long enough to evolve new countermeasures to human tactics. But as Sarah looked at the map, she saw something else. A possibility that would never occur to the aliens, either the Vorthak or the Coalition. A way to turn the enemy's strength into their greatest weakness. "Rodriguez, How long would it take to move our entire fleet to the Kepler Nebula? Sarah asked. Admiral, that would leave Altair completely undefended, Rodriguez protested. Answer the question. About 2 weeks, if we push the ships to maximum speed, Sarah smiled. It was the same smile that had frightened coalition diplomats and confused Vorthik strategists for months. The smile of someone who was about to do something. That made perfect sense to humans and no sense to anyone else. Send a message to all fleet commanders, Sarah ordered. We're not going to wait for the Vorthak to attack Altair. We're going to attack them first while they're still concentrated in the nebula. But Admiral, Colonel Park protested, attacking an enemy when they're at their strongest position goes against every military principle? Every alien military principle, Sarah corrected. But humans have a saying, hit them where they ain't. Expecting it when they ain't expecting it with what they ain't expecting, the Vorthik think they understand us now. Time to show them they're wrong? As orders went out to prepare the fleet for humanity's most ambitious offensive yet, Sarah thought about the words of an old human general. The enemy gets a vote in every battle plan, but they don't get to vote on whether we're crazy enough to try it. The Vorthik were about to learn that humans were much crazier than they thought. 6 months after the war ended, Admiral Sarah Chun stood before the reformed Galactic Assembly in the Great Hall on New Centaurus. The massive chamber held representatives from over 200 species, many of whom had thought they would never see this day. The Vorthik swarm was gone, destroyed in the final battle at Kepler Nebula, and the galaxy was finally at peace. But peace, Sarah had learned, could be just as complicated as war. Admiral Chun, spoke Chancellor Yuthmarin the Small, insectoid being who now led the reformed assembly. Before we proceed with today's ceremonies, the Assembly would like to hear your account of the final battle. For the historical record, Sarah nodded and stepped forward to the speaking platform. Around her, hundreds of alien faces looked up, with expressions of gratitude, curiosity, and in some cases barely hidden fear. She had become something of a legend in the 6 months since Kepler Nebula, but she knew that legends could be dangerous things. The battle itself was actually quite simple, Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. We took our entire combined fleet, 10,000 human and coalition ships, and attacked the Vorthak concentration. In the nebula, they had 50,000 bioships waiting for us. She paused, remembering the moment when her fleet had dropped out of faster-than-light travel and seen the massive enemy force waiting for them. Even after months of fighting the swarm, the sight had been overwhelming. Bioships stretched across space like a living constellation, pulsing with organic energy and hungry for battle. The Vorthak expected us to retreat when we saw how outnumbered we were, Sarah continued. Instead, we attacked immediately, focusing all our firepower on their largest command vessels. We knew we could not win a traditional battle, so we did not fight one. The truth was more complicated than Sarah was willing to explain to the Assembly. The final battle had been humanity's greatest gamble, based on months of studying Vorthik behavior and biology. Human scientists had discovered that the swarm's greatest strength, their ability to adapt and evolve during combat, was also their greatest weakness. The bioships were all connected through some kind of biological network. When one ship learned how to resist a new weapon, that knowledge spread to all the others within hours. But the network had a fatal flaw. It could be overloaded. Human forces had spent weeks developing thousands of different weapon types, each one designed to force the Vorthak to adapt in a different way. Projectiles that changed their properties every second, energy beams that shifted frequencies randomly, chemical weapons that altered their composition mid-flight, electromagnetic pulses that carried computer viruses, specifically designed to confuse biological systems. When all of these weapons were used at once, the Vorthak network tried to adapt to everything simultaneously. The biological systems that allowed the swarm to evolve became tangled and confused, like a computer trying to run too many programs at the same time. The battle lasted 18 hours, Sarah told the Assembly. We lost 3,000 ships and 40,000 soldiers. But when it was over, the Vortex swarm no longer existed as an organized force. The surviving bioships scattered across the galaxy, and our pursuit fleets have been hunting down the remnants ever since. What Sarah did not mention was the moment when the swarm's network had finally collapsed. The bioships had stopped moving in coordination and began attacking each other, their biological systems so confused that they could no longer tell friend from enemy. It had been both victory and horror, watching an entire species destroy itself in a frenzy of evolutionary chaos. The Assembly recognizes Admiral Chun's heroic leadership, Chancellor Ythmarin declared. And we now move to the primary business of today's session. Sarah knew what was coming. For weeks, representatives from across the galaxy had been debating the question that everyone knew had to be answered. What role would humanity play in the post-war galaxy? Admiral Chun, the Chancellor continued, the reformed Galactic Assembly has voted unanimously to offer humanity full membership in galactic civilization, with all the rights and privileges that membership entails. We also offer to share our advanced technologies in medicine, science, and peaceful energy production. Sarah had expected this offer. What she had not expected was what came next. However, the Chancellor said, the Assembly has also voted to offer humanity something unprecedented in galactic history. We wish to appoint your species as the primary guardians of galactic security. Earth would become the military headquarters for all of galactic civilization, and human forces would be responsible for defending against any future threats. The chamber fell silent. Sarah could feel the weight of hundreds of alien gazes upon her, waiting for her response. This was the moment that would determine humanity's future among the stars. Chancellor, members of the Assembly, Sarah began, I am honored by your offer. But before I can accept on behalf of humanity, I need to address something that has been unspoken in this chamber. She looked around the room, making eye contact with as many representatives as possible. 6 months ago, you were desperate enough to contact the species you had quarantined for 3 centuries. You called us violent, dangerous, and unpredictable. Today, you want to make us the guardians of galactic peace. What changed? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Finally, it was Admiral Venturok who stood to answer. The Zelani commander had become one of Sarah's closest allies during the war, and his species had suffered terribly under Vorthak occupation. What changed, Admiral Chun, is that we learned the difference between violence and evil, Venturok sighed quietly. We confused human aggression with human cruelty, and we were wrong. You are indeed violent and dangerous and unpredictable. But you are also brave and loyal and willing to sacrifice everything to protect innocence. The Vorthak were evil, you are not, Sarah nodded slowly. And what happens the next time the galaxy faces a threat that requires violence to stop? Will you still want dangerous humans around, or will you try to quarantine us again? Never again? Spoke a new voice. Sarah turned to see Commander Zara Thelvos rising from her seat. The Alterian officer who had led the evacuation from Kepler Sector now served as the Coalition's liaison to human forces. Admiral Chung, I was one of the officers who argued against contacting humanity, Zara said. I believe the old stories about human savagery, but I have fought alongside your soldiers and I have seen what real courage looks like. The galaxy will never again make the mistake of fearing those who are willing to fight for others. The chamber erupted in voices as representatives from dozens of species voiced their agreement. Sarah listened to the chorus of alien languages all saying the same thing. Humanity was welcome in the galaxy, not despite their warrior nature, but because of it. When the noise died down, Sarah stepped forward again. On behalf of the people of Earth and all human colonies, I accept the Assembly's offer, but I want to make something clear. Humanity will serve as the galaxy's guardians, but we will not serve as its rulers. We have no interest in controlling other species or imposing our will on galactic civilization. She paused, thinking of all the human soldiers who had died to make this moment possible. We will be what we have always been, the ones who stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. We will be the shield that protects the peaceful and the sword that strikes down the evil. And we will do this not because we are better than other species, but because we are willing to pay the price that peace requires. The vote was unanimous. Earth became the headquarters of the new Galactic Defense Force, and human ships began patrolling the Outer Rim territories where new threats might emerge. As Sarah left the assembly chamber, she thought about how much had changed since that desperate distress call had reached Earth. Humanity had gone from quarantined outcasts to the galaxy's protectors in less than a year, but perhaps the most important change was not in humanity's status, but in their purpose. For the first time in human history, their warrior spirit was being used not to fight each other, but to protect everyone else. Later that evening, Sarah stood on the observation deck of the new defense station orbiting New Centaurus. Through the transparent metal, she could see ships from 100 different worlds, working together to build a better future. Her communicator chimed with a message from Earth. It was from her old friend Marcus Webb's daughter, who had just graduated from the Space Force Academy. Admiral Chun, I wanted you to know that I'm requesting assignment to the Outer Rim Patrol. Dad always said that the best place for a human soldier is wherever people need protecting the most. Sarah smiled as she looked out at the stars. The galaxy was vast and full of unknown dangers, but it was also full of hope. And as long as there were humans willing to stand guard in the darkness, that hope would never die. The quarantine was over. Humanity had finally come home to the stars. Not as conquerors, but as guardians. And the galaxy was safer for it.